Well, hi everybody. This is a lesson on negative sentences in the past tense, and I want to get straight to it. We're going to start with sentences with be. In English, the verb be is often the main verb of the sentence. In this case, you need to show if it is present tense or past tense. For example, slavery is a system of forced labor. It is horrible. In the United States, in the 1700s, slavery was legal. So in all of these sentences, the verb be is the main verb, and depending on the meaning of the sentence, that can be in present tense or past tense. The verb be can also be a helping verb. So in these cases, you still need to show if it is present tense or past tense. For example, plantations in the South were using slaves instead of paid workers. Many slaves were beaten and abused. So in these sentences, were and were are examples of past tense verbs of be. So it's easy to make negative sentences with the verb be. You just add not after the verb. And this rule is the same in present tense and in past tense. So I have some examples here. These sentences are not true. So if you look at the first sentence, the slaves were treated like human beings. That's not true at all. The slaves were happy with their life. This is a good system for any country. Like all of these sentences are totally false, so to make them negative, add the word not. The slaves were not treated like human beings. The slaves were not happy with their life, and this is not a good system for any country. In speaking and in informal writing, it's common to make contractions with be plus not. This can happen in the present tense and in the past tense. For example, in the present tense, am not doesn't have a contraction, but are not turns to aren't, is not turns to isn't. So in the past tense, when we have was not, this changes to wasn't, and were not changes to weren't. So all of that is pretty simple. Let's do a little bit of practice. So I would like you to pause the video, get a little piece of paper or a scratch of paper, and complete these past tense sentences. So you can, in some sentences, may need was, wasn't, were, or weren't. Okay, did you write down your answers? I'm going to share my answers right now. Harriet Tubman wasn't born with the name of Harriet. She changed her name when she married her husband. John Tubman wasn't a slave. He was a free man. Harriet and John were living in Maryland when Harriet decided to run away. And number 4, it was a decision which changed her life. So this is not a test. If you got a wrong answer, feel free to cross it out and correct it. But now we're going to continue. The part 2 of this lesson is sentences with all other verbs. So the verbs that are not be have a different way of forming their negative sentences. So if a sentence is using any other verb besides be, then we have to make the negative forms with a helping verb. And most of the time, the helping verb is do. Harriet decided to run away very suddenly. She wasn't prepared for her journey. She didn't have any food. She didn't have warm clothes. And she didn't know the way. So in the first part of this, you can see a negative with the verb be, and in the second part, we have these 3 negative verb phrases with the verb have, the verb know, and all the other verbs are going to look this way. In the present tense, there are 2 forms of the helping verb, so sometimes do, sometimes does. In the past tense, there's only 1 form for all subjects, and that is did. So do not in a contracted form makes don't. Does not in a contracted form makes doesn't. Did not in the contracted form makes didn't. When there are two verbs in the verb phrase, we always show the tense, present or past, on the first verb. So one common mistake is to show the past tense on both verbs, so please be careful. The verb after did always goes in the base form. Take a look at this sentence. It has a grammar mistake in it. Harriet didn't talk to her husband about her plans. Can you see the grammar problem here? Didn't talked is not a well-formed verb phrase. It should be didn't talk to her husband. Yeah, she didn't talk to her husband about her plans. Why? Because she didn't want him to get in trouble. Let's see. Escaping slaves didn't traveled during the daytime. This sentence has a little mistake in it. Can you see it? Escaping slaves didn't travel during the daytime. That's the correct way to write the sentence. So they always traveled at night. Well, let's do another practice. Take your piece of paper and write down number 1, number 2, number 3. Pause the video. And before I tell the answers, write your own answers for these sentences. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to share my answers. When Harriet first ran away, her owner didn't realize that she was gone. Number 2, when he found out that she was gone, he followed her on his horse. And 3, when the owner caught Harriet on the bridge, she wanted to jump. Pause the video to finish these last ones. Ready for the answers? When the owner saw that she was thinking about jumping, he talked to her in a calm way, and it didn't work. Harriet jumped anyway. Okay, the last part of this lesson is sentences with can. So this is a different rule than the first ones we saw. The past of can is could, and in the present tense, cannot changes to can't. In the past tense, could not changes to couldn't. Sentences with can follow the same rule as sentences with do. So you put them in the past. To put them in the past, you change the helping verb to the past, and you leave the main verb in the base form. So Harriet ran, but she couldn't run fast enough to get away from the men on horses. She couldn't run. So you can see here the past tense of ran is formed differently than the past tense of couldn't run, and that's because run is the base form of this verb. For example, she couldn't cross the river because the men and dogs were blocking the bridge. You can see here we have could, and then we have the base form cross. She couldn't escape in any other way, so she jumped. So here, couldn't escape, we have could plus the base form escape. When she jumped, her master couldn't believe it. So here, could plus the base form believe. I want you to do a little practice with this, so please take your piece of paper and write down the numbers 1 through 5. Pause the video and then write down what you want your answers to be for these 5 questions. Okay, let's check the answers. So I like to study about history, but I didn't like to hear the story about slavery in class yesterday. All of the information and the pictures were so sad. The African people who were brought to America didn't have any choice. The slave traders didn't respect their basic human rights, and if I lived at that time, I couldn't accept slavery. I would fight against it. So just for a quick review, in this lesson we learned 3 ways to make negative sentences in the past. If the verb is be, just add not after the verb. If the verb is anything else, add the helping verb did plus not plus then the verb in the base form. And finally, if you want to talk about ability in the past of can is could. So use could plus the verb in the base form. That's it for this lesson. I hope that was helpful. Please keep your paper where you wrote your answers, and you can turn that in for points in the next class. Bye for now.